Welcome to another episode of my podcast. That's fine with me. Today we're going to be talking about ageism and the problem that I see, or maybe the problem that this problem is not highlighted in the right way and it's not highlighted at all. We're going to be talking about ageism, but at first let's start with the meaning of the word. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, ageism is the act of treating people unfairly because of their age, especially if they're old. And not only dictionary Cambridge is suggesting this meaning. There are different sources over internet where you can check this out, but the main goal is that someone is treated in an unfair way. And who actually came up with this term? In 1969, Robert N. Butler, a gerontologist and a psychiatrist, and he came up with this term because he felt some ages were not treated equally, and he even compared ageism to racism or sexism. He thought that the main audience and the main targeting audience, let's say, was older people, someone who is more mature, and they were bullied. Honestly, I cannot agree with this term. I feel like sometimes we overestimate the problem that young generation is facing, especially Gen Z or even, I don't know, millennials. We are being criticized for not working enough, for being lazy and doing something with their life that the boomers and maybe the Gen Y were not doing to themselves, especially Whoopi Goldberg, the one who mentioned that if you worked harder, if you worked more than 4 hours a day, maybe you could afford an apartment. And a lot of people, they felt not even criticized but bullied in some way because lots of people cannot afford an apartment, lots of people cannot afford a house without mortgages or just even renting, only because of the prices. And the comparison, you can find it anywhere. I believe it's not the main topic of the video, but for boomers, the house they could afford it in a couple of years, maybe like in 10 years they could pay off the mortgage. But for Gen Z, it is so much harder to pay for the rent or to pay for the house because the prices are way higher than the salaries, and the salary is not going to cover the rest of problems like groceries and problems like if you have kids and you have to pay for their, I don't know, some extra curriculum and whatsoever. And of course, like we're not talking about electricity and more to this pile. But if we're talking about Robert and Butler, who invented this term in 1969, I was thinking, like, I was wondering, how old was he when he came up with this idea? He was born on 21st of January, 1927, and he died the 4th of July, 2010. And when he came up with this term, he was 42. This is midlife crisis, I believe, somewhere like that, maybe a little bit less than midlife crisis, but maybe he felt a little bit threatened by people who are younger, and he pointed out that there's some unfairness from younger generation. And of course, I can totally agree with the fact that someone who's 20, maybe 29, they're bullying and they're judging people over 35, maybe 40, 50, and again 60, especially 50. They come up with some different names and some scoof or maybe some other words where they mean that this is old ballin' man who has a little bit of fat. Just it is so weird that people are coming up with some words to describe older generation, and this is more in a way like mean way. But as Robert and Butler and some other scientists were exploring the topic, they think that most of the time we're scared to see what is going to happen to us in 20 or 30 years. And mainly this is just a fear of death. Whenever people are judging someone who's older, they see the outcome and they know what is going to happen to these people in the future, and that is the main reason why they're bullying, because of the fear. Though I can't tell you for sure that I faced this problem with ageism myself, but not in a way when I was judged for being old, allegedly, but for being young. I worked at the embassy, and I told you this numerous times. I worked with a lot of people who were older, and they were much older. They were maybe like over 65, 70, even 75. And every single time they called, they asked for help, they maybe just came over to get their visa, they would call me by my first name. They wouldn't use Miss or Mrs. and use my surname. They wouldn't say this. And most of these conversations, they led to the fact that they didn't really consider me as a professional. They were treating me like a girl coming from the street. And especially, like, some of you might not know this, but I'm from Russia, and in Russia we have a diversity, like not even a diversity, but we try to distinguish two of the, let's say, pronouns. Whenever you use you, in English, there's no difference. You can refer to a person who's a little bit higher in ranking or who is a little bit older than you use you all the time. Like, it doesn't really matter. But in Russia, it is a difference. Whenever you try to call someone that you've never met before, or maybe he's a little bit, just you have the distance, maybe there is a career distance, maybe there's age gap, and maybe you just don't really feel like you're a friend to the person. So you would use not a you, but we call it вы. And the difference is like ты, вы. Вы is used for someone who's, I mentioned this, like older and I don't know, like not a friend or whatever. And ты is used in a way like with your friends or maybe even sometimes with your parents. This is diversity. So when I worked for my embassy, people would come over and they wouldn't use вы as a respected professional way of saying the pronouns. They would use the as someone like a friend or someone they don't like, not even disrespect, but in a way like it is a little bit disrespectful, calling out me without asking if I'm okay with that. Because whenever you're talking to a person, you would always ask, are you okay if I call you ты instead of вы? If it makes any sense for you guys. But I know some other cultures, they do have something similar. For example, in China, if you want to address some issue to a person, you would say ni. It's called you. But if there's someone who's a little bit older or like a little bit different ranking, it's going to be ning. It's not going to be ni hao. It's going to be ning hao. There is just a slightest difference between that. And maybe sometimes it's not used, but it's there. It's there. And that was the main reason why I was thinking that not only older generation is facing this unprofessionalism and facing the rudeness from colleagues or some random people, but even younger generation as well. As, whenever I remember I had some lunch and I went with my parents on a vacation, and the parents, they were somewhere, and there's some woman, she was older, she was maybe like over 60. She would sit with me, she wouldn't ask a permission, she wouldn't ask anything, she just would sit and she would talk to me like a girl, random girl, and she wouldn't respect, I guess, my privacy. She would, it's not, I'm not saying that I'm going to be bitchy about this whole situation. It's something that you can see that someone will not feel comfortable when older generation is approaching them in a way that they're not asking like miss, Mrs., ты, вы, and like ni, whatever. Okay, but the problem that I see in Hollywood right now, whenever I watch Netflix or HBO or any other platforms, for example, let's talk about Netflix real quick. We have, who is there? Grace and Frankie, if I'm not mistaken. Grace and Frankie, these two old ladies, I love the show. The couple was amazing and I really loved them. But I guess in season 3 or maybe season 4, Grace, she stopped dyeing her hair and she went absolutely gray. And whenever people ask her, like, why did you stop dyeing your hair? She said, oh, I don't really want my hair color to define me or my age to define me. I'm the same person. Yeah, I have wrinkles and I'm proud of it. Or I have gray hair and I'm proud of it. Later, I watched And Just Like That from HBO, and then Miranda had pretty much the same answer. She stopped dyeing her hair and she was always orange and, red hair. And then she stopped and she felt like absolutely gray, and she had the same response as Grace from Grace and Frankie. And honestly, I was like, okay, how is it related to ageism itself as a term? And if Hollywood wanted to bring this topic up, and by the way, Grace, in a couple of episodes, she went back to the dyeing. I mean, like she dyed her hair again. And as well as Miranda, she went red haired again right at the end of the season. So she went back to her natural color, like orange or red. And I was like, okay, what did they try to prove us? That we know about the movement, we know that there's a huge problem here, and the fact that we just stopped coloring the hair is gonna change anything. No, let me tell you guys something. When I was 23, I guess, and I went to China, my hair, and especially my brow hair, they went gray. So half of my brow, if I was thinking this brow, is gray, and I have a lot of gray hair. I'm 30, and I have so much gray hair that I'm literally just going to be, I guess, completely gray by the age of 40, in my opinion. I don't really know, but this is my natural color for now. You can't tell it because due to my natural color, it's not super visible, but if I had, black hair or a little bit darker color, maybe the gray hair would have been so much, more visible than with my natural hair color. Okay, but let's talk real quick. My mom, she used to have 2 people from a restaurant, and they went gray when they were 20. And that is the main reason why I don't understand how gray hair is related to ageism. You can become gray when you're 20, or you can have your natural hair color without any gray hair, or like maybe 10% of gray hair when you're even 65 or 70. And that is my problem of Hollywood. They're not portraying the problem in the right way. That is so weird. And in a way, they are defining themselves with the problem of ageism because of bringing up this topic and then going back to the natural color. Another real problem that a lot of actresses, directors, and writers faced maybe 10 or 20 years ago was ageism in the way when people over 40, and especially women over 40, they couldn't get a role, or writers over 40, they couldn't get a script because they were considered old. And I feel this is a real problem. This is a real problem of ageism, but not only for older generation, but when I graduated from my university and I had no experience whatsoever, I couldn't get a job just because I was inexperienced. Sometimes you're too experienced to get a job, or sometimes you're inexperienced to get a job. And whenever I was attending some job interviews, I was asked how old I was, and was 24 back then when I was interviewed for some jobs. And they said, like, your age is a problem. You're a little bit old for a position. A receptionist, let me tell you, a receptionist. I was too old to be a receptionist because I was 24 and I had no experience. What kind of experience do you need to be a receptionist? I'm sorry. I don't really get it. And in a way, I disagree with this bullshit, because, well, if you're smart enough, you can learn everything within, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks. And you can be a good professional in maybe 6 months, like a real professional in 6 months. If you're a receptionist, I'm talking about that. You can take a little bit, it's going to take a little bit more time if you work in a little bit different industry, in my opinion. But, we're learning. And that is a good thing, that you're not bringing the baggage of the previous position to the new position. And it's so easy to teach you how to do certain things, as well as when I started my YouTube channel or any channel, like social media itself, I had no idea what to do, but I learned everything, and in a week or so, and I was searching, looking, and updating some of my information, especially when I started my podcast. I had no experience, how to film, what programs to use, how to do noise reduction, and so on and so forth. But now I kind of know how to do this, and I don't really think that is a problem. This is definitely an ageism, and in most of the cases, I don't really think they're afraid of women to be 24, 25, and have no experience. I guess this is a problem of giving birth, that the young woman, she can get pregnant, and then they would need to pay her some money, but she wouldn't work for 2 or 3 years, and they would need to search for someone else. And that is the main reason why men are preferable candidates for any other positions, because they're not going to get their maternity leave. And again, another problem, this is not ageism, but in a way, they're not considering you because you're in a position of your life when you can get pregnant. I feel like so many people can suffer from ageism in different areas. It can be a movie industry, it can be some other things. But right now, I guess Hollywood has done something better, because they not only bring in the problem as gray hair, they're finally doing a lot of different series related to older actors and actresses, especially Grace and Frankly. I mentioned this before, and just like that, we can see how this three favorite characters are growing, what they're facing when they're over 50 or even 60, and that's what they're showing in the series, as well as the series. I don't remember, my husband watched that, if I'm mistaken, with Dustin Hoffman, and another one, like two older guys, and he was an actor who failed, and then he was teaching some actors to become actors. I don't remember the name. Maybe let me know in the comments what is the name of the film. As well as my favorite show, one of my favorite shows, The Murders in the Building with Selena Gomez. And I loved these two actors, Martin Short and Steve Martin and Martin Short. Steve Martin and Martin Short, if I'm not mistaken. And I love that they said that Selena Gomez, she was perfect for this position because she was old in her soul, and that's why they clicked, three of them. I love the show, and that is the main reason why I think people were so afraid to express their concerns about age and the problem people are facing, that finally we try to explore it in a better way, and maybe show what is going to happen if you hire someone older and over 40. And as well as not Samantha, but Kim Cattrall, she said that when she hit 40 mark, let's say, she had some issues that no one would offer great roles. And then she was offered Samantha Jones in Sex and the City, and that changed the game a little bit, because finally people saw that over 40 was not the end of life. It still had a lot of humor, it still had a lot of things, and people still had sex over 40. And that was the main, I guess, trigger that a lot of platforms started exploring options to hire people that are older than 40. But let's talk about a little bit different issue. One of my friends, she she lost her dad. Unfortunately, he passed away over 15 years ago, I guess maybe even more than 15 years ago. She was my group mate, and her dad, he was 86 when he passed away. And my friend, she was, I guess 15. She was 15 or 16 when he passed away, and I was a little bit shocked. At first, I thought that her dad tragically died because of certain things, but then I realized that he was 86 when she was 15, and it didn't click. I didn't understand that. Later, we talked, and she explained that she had mixed feelings toward her dad when she was growing up, because at first she unconditionally loved her dad, which is fine. We do love our parents unconditionally to some certain point of our life when we can critically see their behavior and whatever. But before that, like again, around maybe 10 up until 10 years old, maybe even 12 years old, before we're teenagers, we unconditionally love our parents. And she did so. But then she had a conflict inside, because she knew that a lot of parents and a lot of kids, they were laughing at her. Why is your grandpa your dad? And sometimes even some doctors that would say, oh, your grandpa is here. And she would correct this doctor and say, no, it's not my grandpa. This is my dad. And they would say, no, 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 you don't understand. This is your grandpa. This is not your dad. And she said, no, this is my dad. I felt like her dad wasn't feeling comfortable in this position because everyone mistaken him for a grandpa. And my friend, she felt super uncomfortable because her dad was really old. He was 70 when my friend was born. And at first, let's say, like some of you would say, like sometimes it can be like you can't predict it. That happened. They had a huge age gap with her mom. The mom and dad, they had a huge age gap. But he was 70 when she gave birth to her second child. So the first child was born when she was, I don't know about her mom, but he was maybe 68 or 67, and then the second daughter, they gave birth when he was 70, and when he died he was 86, so I believe that maybe like she was 15 or 16 when he died. And that was traumatizing, but she knew that it's going to happen, and she knew that her dad wouldn't stay longer than others would expect from their parents, because their parents are a little bit younger. And that is another problem of ageism, that people are getting criticized for giving birth at a very old age, as well as people are like laughing and making fun of some kids that have older parents. This is such a huge problem. Sometimes I even talked to my friend. She said that she faced some negative comments from parents of other kids, and they could comment this toward my friend, and they could say something to my friend like, your dad is so old, like, something like this. And of course she would feel uncomfortable. That is ageism, that people that are older, they can't have kids because they're old. And there's a certain age limit when you can give birth and a certain age limit when you can't. I don't know what I feel about this. I don't know. They should be ready that if they die when their kid is 5 or 10 years old, then their kid is not going to have a parent. And that is, I guess, my main issue with giving birth when you're over maybe like 60, 65, 70. I guess 60 is pretty high number. Maybe like 55. You should understand and realize certain facts that maybe your kid is not going to have a real parent when they're like 5, 10, 15, and 20. And that was the main challenge for my friend as well. Going back to the same topic, she was 15 and her brother, he was 18, and he had to go. And in Russia we have some army training. When you're 18, you have to go to an army and then train for it, and then in a year or maybe 2 years you come home. So she was left alone. Her mom, she was ruined. She had like really bad emotions, and she had to move. They had to sell their apartment. They had to live in their country house. And then her brother, he was out, and my friend, she was forced to find a job and to pay bills. And that was the main issue for her, because her dad, due to his death, he couldn't support family any longer. And she said that it was really traumatizing for a kid, a teenager, to look for a job and to act like a man, to be a man in a family. And when her brother came back in a year or maybe 2 years, I don't remember, finally he took all the responsibilities and he got a job and all of it. But for a certain period of time, she had to act like a man. And her mom, she worked, but it wasn't enough to provide for the family. And I know that sometimes some situation can happen to young people and they can die in a car crash or in a plane crash and anywhere else. But statistically, of course, someone who's older and might have some unexpected death is more willing to live his or her family without a provider. than someone who's younger, because like the accidents are not that popular as an age problem. And of course, I want to talk about one more small aspect. Society is viewing age on a different levels, and I talked about parents and kids when they saw my friend's dad and they called him grandpa and laughed at her. So the main problem that people think of older generation, that seniors are not able to learn new things. I'm gonna read this from some of the websites. I agree and disagree. Of course, a lot of people, if they want to learn new things, they will learn, and it doesn't really matter what age they are. And especially, I know like Chinese, they're huge fans of new technologies and they know how to use it, and they use their phone. Even in 2018 when I went to China, a lot of old generation, not even a lot, like all of them used their phones. They paid with their phones and did everything with their phones. And opposite to China, Russia was one of the, and is still one of the problematic, I guess, society where someone who's older, 50, even 50 and 60, they're not willing to learn something new, and they're not willing to use their phones to pay something, and just like they're forced to do that. Then seniors are incapable of remembering things and have cognitive defects. Well, I don't know. This is not true. They're more than capable of remembering things, and sometimes it is caused by other factors as dementia or maybe Alzheimer, all those type of problems. But it is caused by a way the lifestyle they had years and years prior, and that was the main reason why they can't remember things. But if they had pretty healthy lifestyle and they were learning a lot of things, then I don't really think it's going to be an issue. Though my grandpa, when he had some issue, he stopped reading. He had some sort of depression. I don't really know. My grandma insists that he had a depression. And he stopped reading. He stopped learning information. And he was a smart man when he was alive and before his, problem. But in 3 years or I guess maybe 4 years, when he stopped learning anything and just reading itself, he was just staying in bed, eating, drinking, and sleeping. And that was it. And then he couldn't solve a simple math problem because he wasn't doing anything to his brain. Seniors are not able to understand and use technology. Well, I talked about that. In China, every single person, it doesn't really matter how old he or she is, they're using technologies. But in Russia, they just don't want to use technologies. They're so rigid. They're so not doing that. And a lot of their kids and grandkids, they're doing this for them. So yeah, it's not the problem, it's they're not willing to learn how to use technology. Seniors are rigid and inflexible. Like you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I agree. This is stubbornness, and sometimes I guess they don't really want to adjust. It's not the problem that they can't. It's more like they don't want to. And whenever you want to do something, of course, it can be slower. It's going to take time. It's not maybe going to be the same way as a newborn who's going to, learn how to use some different gadgets and some different IT technologists within like 5 years of his life or her life. Seniors are lonely and depressed. I agree and disagree. A lot of my grandma's friends, they were depressed because they didn't want to communicate. They had no kids or they had no grandkids. They didn't want to go out. They didn't want to walk. They didn't want to do anything. Just stayed at home. They lied in their beds and they were sort of depressed. My grandma, we can't stop her from moving. And in a way, she's moving too much. Sometimes it's too much that her body starts trembling because of the pressure and too much movement. And whenever we tell her just stay in bed, you can walk maybe an hour, just slow walk, and it's gonna be enough for you. It's like you're 75. My grandma is 78. You're 78. And she had spine surgery. She broke her arm because she went for a walk when it was super icy, and then she fell and she broke her arm, she broke her wrist. That is a huge problem with my grandma. We can't stop her, and she's not depressed at all. That is the main reason why I don't really think my grandma is lonely or depressed or anything, because she's doing a lot. She's full of energy. Sometimes I can't understand where she gets all this energy. I don't really get that much energy. And of course, seniors are always sick, dependent, and fragile. Well, they're not always sick. I know a lot of old people that are pretty much okay. Of course, they take some medicine. Of course, they take some pills, some necessity, and I totally get it. But at the same time, I don't really think they're always. It's more like the way you behave and the way you kind of try to portray yourself to others. And sometimes I even watched one of the psychologist, and she said my grandma was never suffering from loneliness, depressions, and some sicknesses and whatever, because she had a good routine. Her grandma, before she passed away, She was over 70, and her routine was pretty simple. Every single day, she changed her shits. And I'm talking about bed sheets. She was doing some bedding. She was taking showers every single day. Every day, she was taking showers. She would regularly clean her closet. She would regularly clean the floors. She was just a clean person, and that was it. The main problem a lot of older people facing that they stop taking showers, and they take showers once a week, and they stop washing their, I don't know, sheets, they stop washing their clothes, and whenever you come in their house, it smells like old generation. And this is not a problem. This is not a real problem. This is something that can be easily avoided just if they wash their shits, and they wash their clothes, if they wash themselves, and it can be easily avoided. They stuff their houses with some, you know, stuff that is not needed. And that is the main reason why when you come in, you see piles of things that were not meant to be here, and they should be trash bag. And this is a problem of ageism, that some elders and some old people, they behave in a way that they don't they're too stubborn, and they don't want to move on. They just wait for the time when death comes, instead of just carry on with their life. And instead of being depressed, maybe go for a walk, help with your grandkids, help with your kids, and just live a full life. Go for like a swim, or maybe just do some exercises at home. You have YouTube, you have other sources, as well as young generation, Gen Z. They're doing Botox, they're doing a lot of cleansing at the age of 15 or 16, which is crazy. I mean, why would you do this when you're 16? I remember when I was 16, I used absolutely nothing, guys. I used no creams, no lotions, no moisturizers whatsoever. Once, maybe in a year, I could use some cream if I felt my hands were super, super dry, but it was rare. I didn't use creams a lot, and I still don't really use a lot of creams. I guess it's overpowering my skin. It's making my skin lazy. It doesn't really want to take care of itself. These kids, they start looking older than they are, but they're still judging someone who's older. So I am 30, and believe it or not, I don't really know. I'm not gonna say that, oh, I look so much younger than some other people, but yeah, sometimes I do look younger than someone who's 18 or 19 and who's doing Botox. And they're doing Botox when they were 16, and it's making them look so much older, and then they're criticizing like 40-year-olds or 50-year-olds for being old. Well, we don't know how you are gonna look when you're like 50, okay? Because with all the stuff and moisturizers, it's weird, especially when I watch some influencers and they're saying like, the moment I turned 30, my skin, woo, my skin was so dry, or my skin, or wrinkles and whatever. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so afraid to be 30. And I was a little bit pressured to feel like if you're 30, then something changes. And no, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed to my skin. It is because I'm not using all of the products every single time. Of course, when I take off my makeup with some cleansing oil, with my La Roche-Posay soap, I take it off, it feels dry. And that is the main reason why I use some canola oil, and that is it. I used to use Nivea, and then a little bit of oil, but for now I'm out of Nivea, and it still feels good if I use just a little bit of oil, and that is it. And I go to bed, and the next morning, yeah, I do feel a little bit dry in this area sometimes. So if I feel extremely dry, I can add a little bit of product. And that's something that a lot of influencers missing in their speech, that they're using so many products, like 15-step routine, that of course their skin there, it becomes lazy. And when you're 40, it's going to be even worse, because well, your skin is lazy when it's 30. What is going to happen if your skin is 40? It's not going to do anything. And what about 40 with Botox, with all the products? I know that sometimes skin needs this boost. Sometimes some skin, they do need some refreshment, and they do need a little bit of moisture. And I'm not talking about dermatologists, and I'm not talking about some issues, real issues. But if your skin doesn't really need it, why would you add that much skincare? I don't know. But it's up to you guys. So ageism is an issue in some ways, but people are working on that. And try to be kind, try to make sure that you're not going to hurt someone and their feelings if you're 20 and they're 50, or if you're 50 and you think that someone got promotion when they're 30, then they don't deserve it because they're 30. It is not fair as well. So this ageism is working vice versa whenever you judge someone who's younger and whenever you're judging someone who's older. Just try to be kind, try to make sure that you've been there. You've been a 30-year-old, you've been a 20-year-old, and you're probably going to be a 70-year-old. Hopefully, maybe 80 and 100-year-old. I don't know, guys, depending on. Just take care of yourself, take care of your relatives, and maybe try not to make someone think that this is the only way around. And I'm talking about older generation. Do not try to make everyone think that you're the only right person. And maybe this way, kids and younger generation are not going to be harsh on you as well. And if we're talking about politicians, you can see that a lot of politicians, they're old, they're really old, they're over 70. And with the economy and the problems that nations are facing and wars all over the world, you're like, I don't really trust old generation, because what they've done, it led to a crisis and wars. That is the main reason why maybe ageism is present, because we see all the things they've done with their knowledge and their experience and their power. Okay, what do you think? Let me know in the comments. What do you think about ageism? Are you someone who is judging people, or someone who is judged by your age? And I'm going to see you in my next podcast. Bye bye.